Welcome to the Centerpoint Podcast, where nursing and law unite. Welcome to the Centerpoint Podcast, where nursing and law unite. I'm Jackie, the host for today, and I have the privilege of speaking with attorney Amy Risseeuw, who practices at Peterson Burke & Cross in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I first met Amy in 2020. I had walked away from the hospital to work on my consulting business first time in 2019, and then COVID hit. And so by March of 2020, everything had shut down and the courts were trying to figure out what they were going to do. My clients kind of stopped for a while. They kind of paused, so to speak. And I thought, this is crazy. What am I going to do here? And I had been consistently trying to work with Peterson Burke & Cross for a while. I thought this is a great opportunity while it's slow to reach back out to them. So I actually called. And the person who answered the phone said, "Oh, well, have you talked with Amy?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, let me put you in contact with her." And so Amy agreed to see me in person. So we're in the middle of the pandemic. I agreed to wear a mask. I drove 3 hours. We sat way far away from each other in the conference room, and we had a wonderful discussion, wonderful time. And by the end of the day, I was walking away with a case, and that started our relationship. And since then, we've been working together. Amy was also my first female attorney, which to me is very important that we discuss that today as well. And so welcome, Amy. Do you remember our first meeting?
I do, Jackie. I also believe our second meeting involved a Mexican restaurant. So that one was a little more fun. But yeah, things were very strange during the pandemic. It was a different time.
It was. So talk to us a little bit about how you decided to go into law and what brought you to Peterson Burke & Cross.
Most of my legal career is by chance, just happenstance. I actually became interested in law. My parents are not lawyers. My parents don't even have college degrees. So this wasn't a family business or anything. I was raised Lutheran and we were in confirmation class. And I was talking to my pastor and said, well, I don't understand the resurrection. I think this is a cop-out. I think it's just because they can't produce the bones. And eventually the pastor paused and said, well, that's why they call it faith. And have you ever considered a career in law? I said, no, I don't know anything about it. That was at 8th grade. So at that point, I started to look at law. As for how I came to Peterson Burke & Cross, so I was interested in law, but like I said, I have no family, no connections, no mentoring. There was no one I knew who was a lawyer. And when I graduated from undergrad, I went to Madison and received a 4-year degree in political science and Spanish. I wanted to go to law school, but I wasn't prepared to do that without some understanding of what the day-to-day life is in a law firm. So I applied for paralegal positions, and I happened to get an interview and then get a job offer to work at Peterson Burke & Cross. So I started my career in law as Avi Burke's paralegal. And at that time, he had asked me to work for him. He said, look, I can see you're destined to do more things, but would you agree to stay for 2 years? I was thinking I'd work a year if I liked it, go to law school, but that was the best thing that happened. It gave me really a full year and a half almost to think about law and learn about it versus immediately trying to get your application ready to go to law school. And Avi was absolutely the best mentor. He would love to pull me in and have me listen to phone calls with insurance agents. He'd have me sit in on depositions. These are not things that are necessary always for a paralegal to do. There are times that I would listen to the phone call Avi had. I would then type up his dictation of that phone call. I would then make his edits to the dictation. So we'd go through 3 versions of the same call. But by doing that, it really gave me a solid background. When I left to attend law school, I didn't expect to come back to Peterson Burke & Cross. We're a smaller firm. We don't hire a new lawyer every year. But it happened in November of my 3rd year of law school that one of the lawyers here left. Avi was going to be in Madison and asked to meet me for lunch. Met me in my current job. I was clerking for another firm in Madison at the time. Came into that job and offered me a job well at my other job, which is a very Avi Burke thing to do. And in 2005, I came back as a lawyer. And at this point, I have worked every single role there is at the firm.
That's phenomenal to have done that. The experience that you have surpasses anyone that has not had those opportunities, because when somebody in the law firm has a question or has an issue, you're right there. You've been in their shoes. And I'm sure that plays well with the staff.
I hope so. I've definitely lost some of my knowledge through time. Right now, I couldn't tell you the best way to order medical records from Aurora Bay Care, for example. There was a time I knew that. But what I think it really helped me have an understanding of is how the different pieces work together. When I started as a lawyer, they handed me 30 cases, personal injury cases, and said, go. I knew how to run a personal injury case. When I worked in Madison at a firm, a lot of the other law students that were working there would get very concerned about things like, how do I file something in the clerk of courts? I knew how to do that. When I talk to young lawyers, they'll ask questions like, where do I stand when I go to court? Those are all things I had seen. I knew how you walk into a room and do a deposition. I had seen all of that. So I really appreciate that. I will say there are a few times in law school that it almost got me in trouble. I remember a civil procedure class, the professor, this was first year of law school, and it's the big classes you get called on to stand up. And she was questioning me on what discovery to do in a case. And she had described a modest case with, $5,000 to $15,000 of value. And I said, well, I'd send out written discovery interrogatories, and I'd ask these two witnesses questions. And she said, well, I set forth that there were 17 witnesses. Why are you not deposing all of them? And I said, do you have any idea how much 17 witnesses will cost to depose in transcripts? She said, the case is worth $5,000. Why would I do that? You can't take 17 depots in this case. And afterwards, my peers somewhat laughed at me that I used the term depot, like I was, talking lingo, but there were times the practical realities of understanding law firm life did not mesh with law school.
That is cool. And I can see you doing that. Amy, you are one of the few attorneys in Wisconsin that actually practices and takes on medical malpractice cases. And we know that that's due to some of the caps in our state. Can you just explain personal injury versus medical malpractice and why it is that you've decided to take on med mal cases?
Personal injury law is an umbrella. That's the umbrella term. Under personal injury are things like car crashes, dog bites, trip and falls, slip and falls. It could be you're walking through Target and a shelf collapses on you. There's lots of ways that injuries occur. There are some personal injury cases that are a lot more intense, such as medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, products liability. I've worked on a toxic tort case involving benzene in soil. So there's some more challenging cases like that. Not that your standard car crash case can also be challenging. As for how I started doing medical malpractice, I just fell into it. My bosses did it. I had two fantastic mentors, Avi Burke and John Peterson. They had both done medical malpractice work. For my size, we currently have 6 lawyers. I can't afford to do a full-time medical malpractice job. So I usually have definitely less than 5 of what I would call these challenging cases. So currently today, I have 1 products liability case. I have 1 nursing home negligence case. I have 2 to 3 medical malpractice cases open. And then I have car accidents, falls, dog bites, those sort of things. But the real challenge to make a medical malpractice case work is that the expert witness testimony that's needed is so expensive. And there's a lot of travel involved. Even with our post-pandemic Zoom life, there's still a lot of travel. So if I have a pretty straightforward medical malpractice case, I may still spend $50,000 or $60,000 out of pocket on those costs of litigating it. And that's really the real shame, is that all people contact me that may have a very obvious concern. The injury just doesn't have that great of a value. Long time ago, when my boss, John Peterson, had taken in the case, but it had to do with a gentleman who had he was supposed to have a surgery to remove part of his uvula, your little hangy downy thing in the back of your throat. There was 2 options. You can do a surgery to cut half of it off, or you can take off the whole thing. And our client said, I just want to do half and I want to see how that goes. Goes under. They took off the whole thing. The doc just forgot, did the wrong thing. And we tried to pursue that as a medical malpractice case without hiring an expert witness because we thought the mistake was so obvious. You shouldn't need an expert. The case was dismissed in the circuit court for lack of prosecution because we did not have an expert. I took it to the Court of Appeals and I lost there as well, and the Supreme Court didn't pick it up. So I personally had the experience that you can't do these without these experts very easily at all.
You bring up a good point, Amy. I know that one of the things that I offer to attorneys is locating experts. And when I do that, I really take into consideration where the attorney is practicing because of the fact that it does cost so much, especially in the state of Wisconsin with the caps that we have, being sensitive to their needs. So I like to give them more than one or two to choose from if possible, because there are those that are just more reasonable in their pricing. They might not necessarily have testified 20 times. They still have the knowledge, the know-how, but they may be a little more reasonable. And it offers an attorney the opportunity to determine for themselves who they want to go with. They're not stuck with just one choice when asked to locate somebody. And is that something, for those experts that are out there, is that something that you take into consideration when you determine who you're going to retain as an expert? What do you look for in an expert?
So when we work together, Jackie, that is one of the ways you have been most valuable to me in my practice. You also have reviewed records for me to, just give me some points that I should look for in different medical situations, help me with drafting discovery in different medical situations. But the location of experts has been really key. And as you know, in addition to medical malpractice or nursing home negligence, I've had you help me out with a causation expert. I had a woman who was in a car crash. She had a carotid artery dissection. That's not a normal car crash injury. The doctor would not speak to me. And I needed to have someone to testify just to say, look, this is real. It comes from trauma. It's connected. This is not just a genetic abnormality or, a wear and tear sort of thing. And you helped me find an expert for that sort of topic. I do look at location. In all candor, Jackie, I'd like you to please start providing me more experts in Hawaii, because I'm going to have to travel. Let's make it somewhere nice, not Corsica, South Dakota.
Only if I can come with. If I can come with, it's a deal.
I do look at that to some degree, that every now and again, I think on this case, I'd like to go somewhere nice. Is there a way we can get someone who I'm not going to have to pay that much for travel? That's a key consideration depending on the case. But there is something to be said too. The qualifications are obviously key. As the plaintiff side, I don't get paid unless we succeed. And I don't get my cost reimbursed unless we succeed. So the quality of the expert is the most paramount thing. What I'm looking for really varies by expert. And it's a nature of this business that sometimes you had questioning of your last expert that exposed some flaws, that then your next one, you're going to try to kind of look for that. You always ask certain questions that are the high points. Have you been sued? Has your license ever had discipline on it? We got to check out those sort of background things. I'm sure there's experts out there that have some criminal convictions. You don't want to sink 15 grand into a case and then suddenly find out, by the way, your expert has 7 OWIs, because it just doesn't look good. But those other points, it's why I really like working with you, is when we look for these other nuances of what makes a good expert. I don't personally have the skill level to be able to tell you that, hey, the Cleveland Clinic is actually the best clinic in the country for this program. And that's where you can really come in and help me out to say, this is a really good expert. And also a lot of times, and you're always candid with me as far as, I've had other people work with this expert. I got really good feedback. Or I haven't had a lot of people work with this expert, but I've interviewed her. I like this person. You could give that a try too. You always give me that background knowledge. And that's really key to make sure that we can figure those things out. I have had in the past times where experts had given me a report, for example, had all the information. We're not talking about new information comes up. Gets me closer to deposition. And then they call me up. They're like, yeah, I just can't back this up. Well, then why did you take my money? I wouldn't have pursued this case without an expert. By working with you, if I ever did have that experience, I'd contact you right away and you'd know. And I'm sure there's experts that you have said, I'm not going to refer to lawyers I work with. That vetting is really key.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point for those experts that might be watching this. If you cannot deliver a great quality product, back up what you're stating, be candid with the attorneys and actually follow up with phone calls and emails, that information does get back to the person that located them. So for instance, I always ask for feedback. Amy will a lot of times just give it to me. But if I have an attorney that doesn't get in touch with me, I will find them and ask them what they thought. And if they, for any reason, have a red flag, I then make note of that so that I don't have other clients going through the same thing. So it very much is important that you protect your reputation as an expert. At the beginning of this, I said you were the first female attorney that I had the opportunity to work with. Since then, I have several more. I still have more male attorneys than female, and I'm really, I don't care as long as it's a really good attorney to work with, and I can form those relationships. That's really what I care about. But what I have noticed is that, as a nurse, I came from basically a female-dominated world. So when I first started hanging out at the Women's Caucus, going to different women's meetings with women attorneys, I really found out what was happening and what you guys have had to overcome. Can you share from a female attorney's perspective how things have changed since you first started in that area?
Yes, there's a number of different arenas where things have changed and arenas where it hasn't. And part of what has changed simply is I got older. So some of the concerns that still exist, pregnancy discrimination, issues like that, just don't apply to me anymore because I'm older. It doesn't mean they don't exist, but they're not my problem. So you mentioned the Women's Caucus. So I'm actively involved in the Wisconsin Association for Justice, our plaintiff's trial lawyer bar organization in the state, our TLA. We do lobbying in addition to education. And the first seminar I attended in 2005, right after I graduated from law school that first summer, I sat in the back of the room and I was really uncomfortable that I sat in the back the second day. The first day I sat up front by my bosses, but they didn't attend the second day morning session. I did because I'm a good little soldier. There were 100 people in the room, I think 94 technically, because I asked the attendance records later. There were 4 women. One of them was an employee of WAJ. Wow. The first day, I got introduced to many people by my bosses. Multiple people said, "Oh, have you met John's new girl?" The second day, there was one lawyer who spoke to me, and I have told him it's Ralph Tees from Hamish in Green Bay. He turned to me and said, "Hi, I don't think we've met," and held out his hand and shook my hand. And I've told Ralph, he was the only person who approached me that entire weekend. So the way things have changed in AJ, we formed a women's caucus. I believe it was formed in 2008. And I think the idea of just knowing there's other people like you has really helped. I started to see, rather than going to that seminar and seeing 4 women, now there were 15. And when we have the women's caucus seminar, we invite defense women as well. We usually have about 70 or so attend that event. But law schools, even back in 2005 when I graduated, were pretty darn close to 50-50 for male-female. And it was a rude awakening to come into the practice and find out you're some kind of minority. I hope over time things change as far as the way peers, judges, attorneys treat us. I've had judges, I walk in the courtroom, they ask if I'm the court reporter. Well, a judge knows who I'm going to say his because it was a male judge. A judge knows who his court reporter is. They hire that person, they're an employee of the state. They know I'm not their court reporter. Depositions, it happens a lot too, where you get asked if you're here for the court, you're the court reporter. And there's nothing wrong with court reporters. They're super hardworking people. You start to do things like you say, when I walk into an office, I say, "Hi, I'm attorney Amy Risseeuw here for today's deposition in the Smith case." I'm sure anytime I've introduced myself to you, I've not said, "I'm attorney Amy Risseeuw." When I go to PTO conferences for my kids, I don't say, "Nice to meet you, Monica. I'm attorney Amy Risseeuw." But when you walk into a courtroom or a deposition, you learn that you say those sort of things. The things that really frustrate me as far as being a female attorney today, and I'm going to separate this out from being a mother, which is a different category entirely. There's still societal problems that there are plenty of things I have to do differently as a female attorney that a male attorney never needs to think about. And when you look at the medical malpractice realm, all the women you've ever met can tell their stories. And some of the stories I have, one example, I was meeting an expert witness, our expert, we paid this guy, and we met in Chicago for his deposition. He happened to be there from Chicago for a conference that was closer than his home location. So we met in Chicago for his deposition. I go to a hotel. It's the weirdest setup I've ever seen. Like, you normally just have a conference room. It was a conference room with a bedroom attached, a kitchen attached, and a bathroom attached. So it was very bizarre. But I told the expert, I said, "Well, let's go in the hallway and we'll look over your records quick." He said, no, we can just go in this room. And he walked into the bedroom and shut the door. And then he laid down the bed and patted it and said, come lay by me. And I said, oh, no, I've been in the car for 4 hours. I just want to stand. And he said, well, how are you going to see the records I'm looking at? I'm like, oh, they're all numbered. We're fine. And I don't know if that was someone who's just horribly awkward or if it was something else. But I know when I'm there that John and Avi would have never had that happen to them. There is no way an expert witness would have laid down on his belly on a bed next to them and said, come sit by me. That just would never happen. And, I think about even with the last medical malpractice case I tried, we were in Pittsburgh to depose an expert. We were doing that deposition at a hotel. It was an airport hotel, so I didn't rent a car. Trying to find a meal, the closest restaurant, it was kind of a weird industrial-ish area. I can't necessarily walk by myself through 5 parking lots alone after dark. And it just frustrates me that I know the defense lawyer, male, has not a care in the world. And, given the timing and what's going on, I have good relationships with most opposing counsel. If I had wanted to, I could have called them and said, do you mind getting dinner with me? Because I don't feel safe walking by myself. But it's hard to do this job to know that there's other people that don't have to think about that. Do I take an Uber? Do I rent a car? If I feel safe getting into an Uber in a city, I don't know that I don't have allies, backups. So those are different challenges.
I totally understand that from the standpoint of somebody who, for my business, I have to do a lot of marketing. And so consistently finding ways to market and meet people in person and finding ways to keep it very professional. So how to keep it very professional where you're still meeting in a public place, still able to make the impact that you need to is quite different being a female and then a male. You have to be careful. I just had some students here that was teaching, to be a better entrepreneur. And the one was quite shocked that I actually meet with men in public and take them to coffee or lunch. And I said, you know what? In this business, it's something that I highly recommend. Just watch the way that what clothing you wear, that it's out in public, that I would not invite them to dinner. I would invite them to coffee or to lunch. And as long as you set the tone that it's business, that's so important. So we, as women, on your part and my part, we have things we have to think about that male counterparts do not. We have about 5 minutes left. And in this 5-minute period, Amy, I would just like for you to give some wisdom to women that are wanting to go into the profession of law, as well as anyone. So female and, no matter what you're doing, what are some words of wisdom that you give them and what should they look for?
I think the biggest piece of wisdom always is be prepared. I can't control whether a jury likes me. And it may be. I've heard before. I've never met a lady lawyer before. I can't control whether a jury's going to like me. I can't control whether they're going to look at my shoes and think that makes me a bad lawyer. But I can control whether I know all the documents and I do the very best I can to be prepared and to have things lined up. That's always something that's within my control. If I'm in the deposition, I can't control if the technology fails, but I can control if I've had everything organized and ready to go before we start. Mm-hmm. So that's my main piece of advice, is do everything you can to be prepared. And that applies to all attorneys. As far as the female concept and what you were describing a minute ago, I think it's really key. And this is for all lawyers too, but I think especially for the women, find mentors, find other people that do what you do. Whether that's a professional organization, a business organization, it's really important that, and someone can call me if they have questions. If there's a lawyer that's curious about doing personal injury work, how do you go to those networking events? A lot of lawyer events involve alcohol. I don't care to drink. It's just a personal choice. When I was younger, there was constant talk of, you're not drinking, you must be pregnant. Why is your firm still keeping you around? So like I said, I'm old. Nobody cares anymore. They're not going to accuse me of that. You got to get your allies. Get your allies, find mentors and peers. I have a younger associate at the firm. He recently asked me, what do we do if you suddenly get hit by a bus and can't work? And I said, well, you can take all the PI cases, hire someone else and manage it. I said, or you call up Kristen, Caitlin, Whitney, call my friends. See which cases, could you guys take 5 cases because Amy's suddenly gone? I'm like, that's your backup plan. That's how you run a business, is if you need help, you establish those connections and they will help you. and I have helped other people. So those points are really key. A lot of times networking and marketing, I hate it. You've got to develop those connections with people. If I have a new topic, it's a lot easier for me to reach out to friends and say, have you ever dealt with, subrogation with health partners versus trying to start some kind of Westlaw search for that.
All valid points. And I thoroughly always enjoy talking with you, Amy, as you know, because a lot of times I'll start hounding you with emails if we haven't talked in a while.
I think you're just helping me out because I struggle to get everything done. Being prepared is great. I simply don't have time to be prepared as I want to be on every single case. And we'll keep working towards that goal, but it's always great to hear from you because you remind me like, yes, I need to send those records to Jackie. Thank you.
Amy, if someone thinks that they have a good personal injury case, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I prefer to do most of that by phone. And I want to be clear that most people don't know what a good personal injury case is. So
True.
I do really encourage anyone who thinks there might be something they need legal advice for to give me a call. The best way to reach us is our phone number, area code 920-831-0300. Otherwise, you can always find us online. It's foxriverlawyers.com, pdclaw.com. And honestly, just Googling Peterson, Burke, and Cross or Amy Risseeuw. There is another Amy Risseeuw lawyer in North Carolina. So don't go with the mergers and acquisitions lady. Look for the personal injury one.
Thank you, Amy, very much for being on this podcast. And I look forward to working with you some more in the future.
You too, Jackie. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.